Welcome to Mr. Horror. Today, we have 3 spine-tingling true ding-dong-ditch horror stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more bone-chilling horror stories content. Let's get started. It was Halloween night, and the streets were lined with jack-o'-lanterns and decorations. A group of teenage friends, led by the mischievous Jake, had decided to go ding-dong-ditching. It was a harmless prank, or so they thought. They made their way through the quiet suburban neighborhood, giggling and whispering as they approached each house. They would ring the doorbell and run, hiding in the shadows until the unsuspecting homeowners came to the door. It was all in good fun until they reached the last house on the street. The house was different from the others. It was old and rundown, with overgrown bushes and a rusty gate. The windows were boarded up, and the front door looked like it hadn't been opened in years. But Jake was determined to ring the doorbell. As he approached the house, the wind began to pick up, causing the leaves to rustle and the trees to creak. It was an eerie sound that sent shivers down his spine. He reached out to ring the doorbell when suddenly he heard a faint whisper. "Come inside." Jake froze in fear. He looked around, but there was no one there. He shrugged it off as his imagination and rang the doorbell. The sound echoed through the empty house, but there was no response. The group ran away laughing, relieved that nothing had happened. But as they turned the corner, they saw something that made their blood run cold. The lights in the old house had turned on, and a figure could be seen standing in the window. It was a dark shadow that seemed to be staring right at them. They all screamed and ran as fast as they could, but Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was following them. As they reached the end of the street, they looked back and saw the figure had disappeared. The group returned to their own homes, shaken by the experience. But as the night wore on, strange things began to happen. Jake could hear faint whispers and footsteps in his room. He would wake up in the middle of the night, only to see the shadowy figure staring back at him. The other members of the group were experiencing similar things, and they knew they had made a grave mistake by ding-dong-ditching that old, abandoned house. It seemed like something had been awakened, and it was not happy. Little did they know that their innocent prank had opened the doors to a horrifying nightmare that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Days turned into weeks, and the strange occurrences only got worse. The group of friends began to feel like they were being watched at all times, even when they were alone in their rooms. They could hear whispers and laughter coming from empty corners of their homes, and shadows seemed to move on their own. Jake tried to convince himself that it was just his imagination, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He started to research the history of the old house they had ding-dong-ditched, and what he found made his blood run cold. The house had been owned by a wealthy family who had mysteriously disappeared decades ago. Rumors had circulated that they had been involved in dark, supernatural practices, and that their souls were trapped within the walls of the house. It was said that anyone who trespassed on their property would be cursed forever. Jake knew that they had made a grave mistake by ding-dong-ditching the house, and that they needed to do something to break the curse. He gathered his friends, and they decided to return to the old house, hoping to find a way to put an end to the nightmare. As they approached the house, they could feel the weight of the curse bearing down on them. The wind was howling, and the trees were bending under its force. The house seemed to be breathing, as if it were alive. They cautiously made their way inside, and were immediately enveloped in darkness. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and they could hear whispers coming from every direction. The group stuck together, determined to find a way out. Suddenly, they heard a loud creaking sound coming from upstairs. They slowly made their way up, their hearts pounding in their chests. When they reached the top, they saw the figure of a woman standing in the hallway, her eyes glowing red in the darkness. The woman let out a blood-curdling scream, and the group ran for their lives. They could feel the curse chasing them, its tendrils reaching out to drag them back into the house. As they burst through the front door and into the street, they knew that they had finally broken the curse. The old house collapsed behind them, and they could hear the screams of the trapped souls fading away. The group went their separate ways, grateful to have survived the nightmare, but they knew that they would never forget the horrors they had experienced, and that they would never again go ding-dong-ditching. Years passed, and the group of friends had all moved on with their lives, but the memories of that fateful Halloween night still haunted them. They had all tried to forget what had happened, but it was impossible. One by one, they began to receive strange letters in the mail. The letters were handwritten, and they all contained the same message: "I'm still here." The group didn't know what to make of the letters, but they knew that they couldn't ignore them. They decided to meet up and figure out what was going on. As they sat together, the letters spread out on the table in front of them. They heard a faint whisper. It was the same whisper they had heard that Halloween night, the one that had sent chills down their spines. They looked up to see the figure of the woman from the old house standing in front of them. Her eyes were still glowing red, and she looked more terrifying than ever. The group tried to run, but it was too late. The curse had caught up with them, and there was no escaping it. They were trapped, forever haunted by the horrors of that Halloween night. And so, the legend of the old, abandoned house lived on. The neighborhood kids would dare each other to ding-dong-ditch, but no one ever dared to enter the house again. The cursed souls trapped within its walls remained there, watching and waiting for their next victims. It was a cool autumn evening, and a group of friends decided to play a game of Ding Dong Ditch in their quiet suburban neighborhood. They had done this before, and it was always a harmless prank, but something felt off about tonight. As they approached their first target, they couldn't help but feel uneasy. The house was old and rundown, with broken windows and a rusty gate that creaked in the wind. They hesitated for a moment but quickly shook off their nerves and rang the doorbell before running away. As they made their way to their next target, they noticed a strange figure lurking in the shadows. It was tall and lanky, with long arms that seemed to reach all the way to the ground. They couldn't make out its face, but it seemed to be watching them. They tried to ignore it and continued with their game, but the feeling of being watched stayed with them. They reached their next target, a large mansion that had been abandoned for years. They rang the doorbell, but there was no answer. Suddenly, they heard a loud creaking noise coming from the mansion's front gate. They turned to look, but no one was there. They started to get spooked and decided to call it a night, but as they made their way back to their homes, they couldn't shake off the feeling that they were being followed. They quickened their pace and finally made it back to their homes, feeling relieved to be inside. But as they settled in for the night, strange things started to happen. They heard footsteps outside their windows and the sound of someone breathing heavily. They were too scared to look outside, but they knew something was there, lurking in the shadows, and they knew that their innocent game of Ding Dong Ditch had just turned into something far more sinister. The next morning, the friends woke up feeling uneasy. They had all had nightmares about the strange figure they had seen the night before. They tried to shake it off and went about their day, but they couldn't help but feel like they were being watched. As the day went on, they noticed more strange occurrences. Objects would move on their own, doors would open and close by themselves, and they could hear whispers coming from empty rooms. They knew that something was wrong, and they needed to find out what was causing these disturbances. One of the friends suggested that they go back to the abandoned mansion and investigate. They all agreed, even though they were scared out of their minds. As they approached the mansion, they saw that the gate was open, even though they had heard it close the night before. They cautiously made their way inside and started to explore. The mansion was old and decrepit, with cobwebs and dust covering everything. As they made their way through the rooms, they noticed strange symbols painted on the walls and floors. It was like something out of a horror movie. Suddenly, they heard a loud noise coming from upstairs. They slowly made their way up the staircase, their hearts pounding in their chests. When they reached the top of the stairs, they saw the figure they had seen the night before. It was standing in the middle of the room, surrounded by strange symbols and candles. The friends tried to run, but the figure was too quick. It caught them one by one, dragging them into the room and trapping them inside. They knew that they were in deep trouble and that their innocent game of Ding Dong Ditch had led them down a path of darkness and terror. As the night wore on, the friends realized that they were not alone in the mansion. They could hear strange whispers and footsteps all around them. They tried to stay quiet and still, hoping that they could avoid whatever evil presence was lurking in the shadows. But it was no use. The figure had them trapped, and there was no way out. They knew that they were going to die in that mansion, just like the previous occupants. The next morning, the police were called to the mansion after reports of strange noises and disappearances. They found the friends' bodies, torn apart and arranged in a strange ritualistic manner. The figure was nowhere to be found, but the symbols and candles remained. From that day on, the suburban neighborhood was plagued by strange occurrences. People reported seeing the figure lurking in the shadows, and strange symbols started appearing on walls and doors. The residents knew that something evil had taken root in their once quiet neighborhood, and they knew that the innocent game of Ding Dong Ditch had opened a doorway to a world of darkness and horror that they could never escape. It was a warm summer night, and a group of teenagers decided to play a game of Ding Dong Ditch in their quiet suburban neighborhood. They giggled with excitement as they ran from house to house, ringing the doorbells and running away before anyone could answer. But as they made their way to their fourth target, they couldn't help but notice something strange. The street was eerily quiet, and there wasn't a single light on in any of the houses. It was as if everyone had suddenly disappeared. As they approached the front door of their target, they noticed something odd. The front porch was covered in a thick layer of dust and cobwebs, as if no one had been there in years. They hesitated for a moment but decided to go through with their prank anyway. They rang the doorbell and waited for a few seconds before running away. But as they turned to leave, they noticed something move in the shadows. They tried to ignore it and continued running, but the feeling of being watched stayed with them. Little did they know that their innocent game of Ding Dong Ditch was about to take a terrifying turn. As they made their way to their next target, they couldn't shake off the feeling of being followed. They heard footsteps behind them and whispers in their ears, but every time they turned around, there was no one there. Finally, they reached their next target, a house that stood alone at the end of the street. As they rang the doorbell, they heard a faint whisper coming from inside the house. They couldn't make out what it said, but it sent chills down their spines. Suddenly, the front door of the house swung open, revealing a dark and empty interior. They hesitated for a moment but decided to investigate. As they stepped inside, they noticed strange symbols painted on the walls and floors. They started to feel like they were being watched again, and the feeling grew stronger with each passing moment. They tried to leave, but the front door was now locked from the outside, trapping them inside. They were now trapped in a house that seemed to have a life of its own, and they had no idea what horrors awaited them in the darkness. As they frantically searched for a way out, they heard strange noises coming from every corner of the house. Doors creaked open and shut, and objects moved on their own, as if guided by an unseen force. In the midst of their terror, they stumbled upon a room that seemed to be the source of the strange symbols and whispers. As they cautiously entered, they saw a figure in the center of the room, surrounded by candles and holding a book. The figure slowly turned to face them, and their hearts stopped. It was a figure they recognized from a local urban legend, the ghost of a witch who had been burned at the stake centuries ago. They tried to run, but the witch was too quick. She caught them one by one, and they were never seen again. The quiet suburban neighborhood was forever haunted by the ghostly presence of the witch, and locals warned against ever playing Ding Dong Ditch again, lest they suffer the same fate as those unfortunate teenagers. Thank you for watching our 3 true Ding Dong Ditch horror stories on Mr. Horror. We hope you enjoyed them and they gave you some goosebumps. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell for more bone-chilling horror stories. Until next time, stay safe and be wary of what may be lurking outside your door.